Hello, today we're going to be talking about the immune system. The immune system is a pretty amazing system because it helps us stay healthy. You can see on this slide that we work closely with the organs of the immune system and also the lymphatic system to help fight off infection. As we go through these slides, we're going to talk a little bit about the different lines of defenses that each one of these organs actually does to help us with the infection. So in general, the functions of the immune system is to protect us from things in our environment. First line of defense is always going to be our skin. So whatever is going to happen in the environment has to first get through our skin. Once it does get through our skin or our nose or our mouth, then we need to fight off the pathogen and then come up with long-term resistance or our immunity to what we were just exposed to. So it's a pretty amazing system because it's going to help protect us and keep us healthy. So as we go through this, there's a few terms that we need to define just so you understand what we're talking about. An antibody and antigen you probably have heard of already when we talked about blood back in biology. So an antibody is a protein that binds to antigens. Antigens are typically proteins, and that is going to be foreign in the case of the immune system. And also the terms resistance and defense. So our resistance is our ability to stay away from infectious disease through our own body's defenses. And a defense is what's going to help prevent things from entering our body. So let's look at what an antibody looks like. An antibody is a protein that binds to antigens. Just so you know, there are about 1 million of different types of antibodies that our bodies will produce. They often are called immunoglobulins, okay? And if you can see here, they're made up of 4 chains. There are 2 light chains and there are 2 heavy chains. Now, with the chains, they do have an amino acid sequence that's going to be called the variable region. So what happens is there's going to be the antigen binding site that is going to then have the spot for where the antigen is going to attach. And it's going to be a complementary region. So if you can see here at the end, you can see the antigen is now binding to the antibody. And again, the antibody is 4 different chains. Antigens are the things that are foreign, and these antibodies are little cell receptors that our cells are going to use to recognize, is this something foreign? So with different immunity, we have terms called active versus passive. So active immunity is going to depend on our own typical response to the pathogens. Now, this can be a natural or an artificially required. For active immunity, we can make our own antibodies from being exposed to something in the past, like the common cold, or we can get vaccines that will help give us those antibodies because a vaccine is typically dead or a little bit of a live virus. Okay, so active immunity, maybe an example would be us recovering from the chickenpox. Passive immunity is a little different because it's the transferring of antibodies from one individual to another. So this happens when women are pregnant. They will transfer their antibodies to the baby. And also there's a way that weak immune system people, or I should say people with a weak immune systems, they can get an injection of gamma globulin. And the gamma globulin actually has antibodies from various different people, and that is used to kind of help build their own immune system. So you can see here the difference between active and passive immunity. Again, active is going to be your own immune system or something with vaccines, and passive is also going to be transferring, and it's going to either be transferring from mom to baby or through an injection of gamma globulin. We also talk about 2 types of defenses when we talk about the immune system and infections. So we have non-specific defenses and we have specific defenses. Non-specific defenses are going to protect us from foreign substances. Now, like I said, there's a first line of defense, and that's going to be your skin. So physical and biochemical barriers are considered the first line of defense. So physical barrier, skin, mucous membranes, maybe like the lining of the respiratory tract with the cilia that are going to help sweep out the dust and the microorganisms, stomach acid, and mucus with the mucous membrane also, if you remember, contains the antimicrobial substance that will help. Okay. Our second line of defense is called phagocytosis and pretty much the destruction of foreign material. So the phagocytes are found in blood and our lymphatic system, skin, lungs, liver, brain. And what they're going to do is they're going to eat up or destroy the foreign material. This is very important in the inflammation process. And some examples of phagocytes would be a neutrophil or a macrophage. We also have natural killer cells or NK cells. These cells destroy viruses, and they also can affect and destroy cancerous cells. So pretty much these are cells that recognize cells that have an altered surface. They don't use phagocytosis. Instead, they cause the cell to lyse or burst, and that's going to cause it to die. A complement is a group of proteins in blood that leads to the lysis of the invading cells. And then the interferons are going to be groups of proteins that will fight off viral infections. So how this works is they bind to the surface of uninfected neighboring cells, and that's going to initiate a series of reactions that's going to block the neighboring cell's ability to manufacture viral proteins. So this kind of makes the cells incapable of supporting the viral reproduction that occurs, and that will halt the spread of the infection. Now, with that, the main thing is we want to stop the infection. And one of the main things, and like I pointed out before, is through inflammation. And that is going to allow our body to kind of combat it, because we're going to have our leukocytes, which are neutrophils, which are white blood cells pretty much. They're going to escape those blood vessels and they're going to accumulate. And that yellowish liquid that we call pus is going to cause that swelling that we have that's often very painful. But that is actually our immune system starting to fight the infection. And again, these are with non-specific defenses. So once we do get into specific defenses, this is now called our immunity. This is a protection against a particular type of invader. So what happens is we are going to now initiate a two-pronged attack. It's going to be our third line of defense, which is the the activation of B cells and T cells. And so this picture is just kind of showing you that we have three different barriers. Again, we're going to first start off with skin, our acids, our mucous membranes that are going to be stopping the infection from getting in. And if it does get in, we could cough or sneeze or vomit it out. Then once we get in, if it gets into our system, then we're going to get into the macrophages, which is going to phagocytize, the neutrophils, which is going to make that pus that's going to help, the complements, which are the group of proteins in the blood that are going to initiate the reactions to make little holes in the foreign cell to make them die. And then the third line of defense is again going to be our defense with the B cells and the T cells. And this is all with humoral immunity and cell-mediated immunity, which is what we're going to talk about next. So humoral immunity is going to be what our body does to make antibodies. This is going to be defending against toxins, bacteria, and viruses. Cell-mediated immunity is going to be solely with lymphocytes, and it's going to have different types of cells that are going to defend us against bacteria, viruses, fungus, protists, worms, and if we talk about organ transplants. And this is just kind of showing you that in a pictorial way. Again, the humoral response is going to be dealing with the production of antibodies, and the cellular response with the cell-mediated immunity is going to be with different lymphocytes. And you can see here that we have some that are called helper T cells, killer T cells, which are the cytotoxic T cells that are going to help in defending. So let's chat about our lymphocytes. The lymphocytes are the primary cells of our immune system. These are our white blood cells. They circulate through the blood and our lymph. They are very specific to our immunity. And pretty much we have two types. We have a B cell and a T cell. Now, the B cell, if you look here, this is just showing you what a lymphocyte looks like. This is the bigger purple. Oops, my cat just switched. So again, here we go. We have the lymphocytes is the purple. They're larger than the red blood cells. Okay, so the B cells are called B lymphocytes, and they are called that because they are made in the bone marrow. Now, this is what's going to carry out our humoral response. And the main thing it's going to do is it's going to produce antibodies and secrete them into the bloodstream. Now, one B lymphocyte or B cell is going to have about 100,000 identical antigen receptors on its surface. That's going to allow them to recognize the pathogens. And just so you know that each person is going to produce more than 1 million B cells. Okay, so again, this is the production of antibodies. And just so you know, they live about 4 to 5 days, these cells, and they can, once they become activated, secrete about 2,000 antibodies per second over its entire lifespan. T cells are called T lymphocytes, and that is because they are produced in the bone marrow, but then traveled and mature in the thymus, and that's where the T comes from. And this is what's going to carry out that cell-mediated response. And they have different types of cells. We have helper T cells, killer T cells, and suppressor T cells. So a helper T cell is going to be like a regulatory cell. They're not necessarily the killers. They're going to regulate the immune response by recognizing and activating other lymphocytes. They're going to help the B cells. They're going to stimulate them to produce antibodies. The killer T cells are the cytotoxic T cells, or those are the foot soldiers. They're the ones that are going to attack foreign cells directly, and they're going to release a protein called preferin, which is going to poke holes in the membranes of those cells to make that cell die. And then the suppressor T cells are going to suppress the response of both the B and the T cells. So it kind of shuts down the immune system once the infection is over. Now, to end this, there's two main responses. There's a primary response, and then there's a secondary immune response. The primary response is when you first become infected by a pathogen. So this is the first time. Now, what happens is it takes our immune system about 5 to 10 days to start fighting off this immune system. This pathogen. It's going to start stimulating the antibody production by the B cells. It's going to get those T cells to start attacking. Now, once we have memory, because the B cells will actually cause memory cells to happen, it causes a secondary immune response, which is quicker. And that's when we are already pre-exposed to an antigen. And it is a faster response because our body already has the antibodies in our immune system. So it will increase the attack so that we feel better quicker. If you have any questions, please let me know, email me, and enjoy these notes. Thanks.